Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, a happy and a blessed Sunday morning to all of you out there in TV land. You must need some kind of a life if you're here at 6:30 in the morning. If you're watching at 9, well, at least you've had hopefully your first cup of coffee by now. But this is Faith in Our Hometown. Welcome back, or welcome, if this is your first time watching us, to a conversation about topics that should, I think, hopefully concern us as people of faith in the greater Joplin area. My guest this morning is going to be Ashley Micklethwaite, who is with One Joplin. Ashley's been on our show before. The last time she was here, we were talking about the opioid crisis. And even though we still got plenty of work to do there, this morning we're going to talk about another topic that we're trying to raise awareness of here in our region, and that is food security and hunger here in our hometown, okay? So that's our topic for this morning on Faith in Our Hometown, is hunger here in our hometown. So stick around. After this Mercy Minute, we're going to be right back where we talk about Ashley Micklethwaite about hunger in our hometown. Right back with this Mercy Minute.
I was in shock, and in denial, and I couldn't believe it was me. I was healthy, feeling well, but unbeknownst to me, after the colonoscopy, I found out that I had colon cancer. My name's Mario Guerrero. I'm an ethicist. I help people that are in a hospital and the medical staff process some of the difficult situations. In this case, it was the other way around.
Well, I'm glad they caught it earlier.
On my 50th birthday, I had a regular checkup. I wasn't concerned because I felt well. No family history of this type of cancer, and yet I developed this type of cancer. During the process of the colonoscopy, they were able to remove that polyp. And having that done within the hospital setting, they can just address all the issues right there and then. I'm a great believer in early detection. This is such a silent disease, and you really don't necessarily have symptoms. Go get checked. Follow up with your physician. Don't wait.
Well, again, thanks for being with us for another Sunday morning for Faith in Our Hometown. Ashley, it's good to have you with us. Ashley Micklethwaite, our guest this morning from One Joplin. So go ahead and introduce yourself again to folks. And again, give us a little synopsis of One Joplin.
Yes, so I'm Ashley. I'm the director of One Joplin. And One Joplin is a coalition of many organizations, about 70 plus right now, focusing on trying to make our community just that thriving community by looking at core root cause issues and changing them. And we're also working in neighborhoods too.
Good. And I think it's great, and I think it's really important for people to understand that folks in those helping professions and things really do try to talk to each other to get at some of the root causes, because sometimes we can all be working on our own little silos, but until we actually get together and start sharing what's working, what's not working, what are the bigger issues underneath, we sometimes miss some of those things until we get together and do that. So
yes.
It's important to have a coalition to actually come together, and it's also, I always just find it's always good in that kind of coalition work to just support each other and to say, hey, you're working on that, good for you, because I'm busy over here doing this other thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we work together, you get real big impact, and it's not an adversarial us versus them kind of thing,
right.
And all boats rise in the harbor.
Amen. And we want all the boats to rise here in the greater Joplin area. Carthage, Carl Junction, Webb City, all of them. Kansas, Oklahoma. Let's get all the boats rising around here. It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have been hearing, and we've been trying to do some recent, kind of like conversations with the larger community about food security, and that's even a term that a lot of people are not familiar with. So you want to talk a little bit about that and about what we're trying to approach in the larger picture?
Sure. So I think it's important that people understand what food security and insecurity is versus what hunger is. So today I was hungry. Had a late lunch. Up into that, I was like, oh man, I'm really getting kind of hungry here. Everybody gets hungry. Food insecurity, though, means you don't have access or consistent access to food. usually because of monetary issues. If you're food secure, your refrigerator might be empty, but you've got enough money in your pocketbook that you can go to the supermarket and get what you need, and it's healthy food, and you have food in your home. People who are food insecure don't have that luxury.
And I think, I know I'm blessed. I mean, I can go to the grocery store anytime I want, pretty much buy anything I want, and know, I've got this much money to spend on food, and so, I'll go do that, and, and I can do that, and I really don't have to worry about it, and I don't even have to. I mean, I do once in a while clip a coupon or do things like that, but if I didn't want to, I wouldn't even have to do that. I mean, that's how lucky I am. I'd be okay. I don't have to worry about it. But a lot of people have to clip those coupons in order to make all the ends meet. A lot of those people, even when they try to clip the coupons and they do all of it and they're trying to do it, they still will wind up saying, okay, well, tonight we're going to have just rice and beans because, whatever. And then there are those group of people who won't even have the rice and beans.
That is correct.
So that's what we're what we're trying to raise awareness of, is those folks who can't even do the rice and beans when they need to do that.
Or it's people who have to choose, do I buy food or do I buy my medicine?
Yep.
And we have about 36,000 people in Southwest Missouri, just Jasper, Newton County, that are food insecure.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
Or I even think about those parents who say, okay, I'm going to feed my kids, but there's only this much, so I'm going to feed them but not worry about myself.
Yes.
I mean, and that's just, again, that's one of the reasons why, we went in the direction that we went at St. Peter's in terms of our outreach,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that if anybody needed food on certain days and couldn't afford it, they could come and eat. No questions asked. Okay? Just come and have lunch with us. You can come 3 days a week. We wanted to make sure we did that during the summer, make sure that when the kids were home, that I had to do some of those things. So that was, and that's just our little answer to it in our neighborhood, But that's, that was one of the things that we could do. That was one of the ways that we could respond. But what are we going to do about the bigger picture? What are we going to do about some of that? So, and again, I know there's tons of other organizations out there doing tons of things. But how do we get to the root cause of the insecurity? How do we get to the root cause of how can we make sure that nobody really ever has to, if they've got to buy medicine, that they can still eat?
Right. America is the richest country in the world. We have food aplenty.
Yes.
And some of it is making sure that we use food wisely. We waste so much food in America. If you're going to have a party that's catered, you already know you're going to waste some food. Mm-hmm. It's just a given. One thing that you can do is call food pantries or organizations that make food for people who are food insecure to say, I'm going to have a party. Would you like leftover donated food of this type? And offer that. A lot of times it's not even touched. And people are protected by an act, it's called like the Emerson Food Insecurity Good Samaritan Act.
We just call them all the gleaning laws.
Right.
Yeah, the gleaning laws in a kind of a generic term that basically just said you can't, if you're donating food, you're protected by the food that the food that you donate, as long as you're not intentionally trying to poison somebody or whatever. Correct. You can give that food to a pantry. Now, of course, the pantry has to assess whether or not it's still good. But I mean,
right.
If you're giving it the day of the party, you're pretty good. As long as it wasn't sitting out, in the heat or whatever.
Right. But again, call ahead,
right.
which is good. The other thing that we can do to help, there's two main things that we can do to help change the conversation and the root cause.
Okay.
One is to raise awareness. Hunger in America is stigmatized. There's a lot of conversation of people who are food insecure are lazy and they don't work and they're just asking for a handout.
And let's be realistic. There are some people that exactly fit that bill.
Yes, there
Exactly.
are.
There are going to be people out there who fit that bill. And I know that, that we're probably feeding some of them.
Yeah.
But there are those other people who we've stigmatized right along with those who maybe don't deserve that stigma.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So
Yes.
where do some of these folks come from, or what do you think are the other root causes?
Well, 83% of the people who are food insecure have a working adult in the house. Most are working. They are the working poor.
Okay. Yep.
They are the people who check you out at the supermarket. They are your daycare workers. They work and they work hard, but they don't make enough per hour to make ends meet. And that's the reality in America. If you're making minimum wage and you have a family of 4, after you pay basic living expenses, rent, utilities, $200 going to a car, so you can get back and forth to work. At the end of the month, you have $153 left. That's it. For anything else, for a medical emergency that might pop up, or if the car breaks down, that's all you have left. And so the only way these families can really get adequate food is through help, whether that's food supplemental assistance program or what used to be called food stamps,
Right.
or through our local food pantries and feeding programs.
Yeah. And again, I don't think it's so hard, I think, sometimes when you've been blessed to understand why somebody else can't make it all work on that. But I mean, really, and so many times when you do the math, it's just like, some people are just like one little disaster away from, they're doing okay as long as nothing goes wrong. But one illness or one thing that breaks, or a refrigerator breaks down and, they can't get it fixed, or, has to be replaced, or, it's just, those are the kinds of things that you have people that one step away from insecurity. So they may be okay now, but when that one thing happens, they wind up suddenly in trouble.
Sure. If you're healthy and you fall and you hurt yourself and you can't go to work for a short time, you've got a gap. And because you've been making minimum wage, you haven't saved money. You're literally living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when I was first ordained, and I thought I was, living paycheck to paycheck, but I still had a roof over my head and I still had food on my table and all those kinds of things. And it was like, okay, I just don't understand, what it's like to be in that situation. I'm just blessed in that
Yes.
context, and so many people are. At any rate, we're talking a little bit about food security, and we're talking with Ashley Micklethwaite, who is the director of One Joplin, a coalition of folks who come together to say, how do we deal with some of the root causes of these things? So we're going to be right back after a short break. This is Faith in Our Hometown. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
So again, our topic this morning is food security and how do we deal with hunger in our own community. We were talking before the break about how some people just are okay, they're living from paycheck to paycheck, but all of a sudden something goes wrong and they either can't work or something breaks or they have an illness or whatever, and they go from secure to insecure in a heartbeat. How do we get to some of those root causes? What can we do to help change the system for the better, so that those 36,000 here just in our 2 counties are maybe a little bit more secure? What do we do?
The best thing we can do is help our elected officials really understand the nature of the problem. Let them hear from the people who are directly impacted. And that can be hard because people who are directly impacted don't want to be in the spotlight.
Right.
But giving them a voice is so important to help them understand how policy can really make their lives better. We have some incredible programs in our country, like free and reduced lunch programs,
Right.
which was monumental in changing food insecurity for children in America. And we reap the benefits of that program every day. We know that kids who have adequate nutrition, their brains develop better, so they can go on to learn better and get a better education and get a better job. And so again, it's rising boats in the harbor. If we can help them for sometimes it's a short amount of time to bridge that gap, then the long-term benefits are tremendous.
Right. So that's one of those things. So, making sure that our elected officials get the support that they need to know the whole story.
Yes.
And so that they can help.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's good. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Yes.
And again, how often do we even talk to our elected officials about something like food insecurity?
Do you know your elected officials?
Yeah. Or those that are seeking to be our elected officials. Those things are important.
They're important.
And having
Yes.
those conversations, and some of the organizations that we work with, again, how successful have we been at, doing that educational push, to help not only elected officials, but even people in our own congregations or sitting in our own
Absolutely.
pews about some of those things. Again, people don't always understand, but our folks who come to the outreach have a better understanding, once they've worked there for a little while,
Yes.
about why some of our folks are, sometimes struggle with food,
It's helping your neighbors understand. It's helping the congregation understand. Maybe it's inviting some members who receive services at your outreach to speak to members of your congregation that don't volunteer there.
Yeah. And again, and that doesn't mean that there are not going to be people out there who are taking advantage of the system or damning
Sure.
the system. That's always going to happen. One of my coworkers, I think I've used this quote before on the air, but one of my coworkers who works at the diocese once just said, he said, when you're in the charity business, nobody can take advantage of you. And I said, wow. He said, yeah. He said, when you just basically set yourself up there to say, we're going to do things out of love, and we're going to do things in charity, nobody can take advantage of you. And I'm like, I'd never thought about it that way, but there's some truth to that,
There's absolute truth
Now,
in
granted,
that.
that does not mean that people like you and I do not have the grave responsibility to make sure that we are getting the bang for our buck.
Absolutely.
Nobody gives us anything so that we can throw it out the window on the way down the highway.
That's right.
That's goofiness. I mean, and we're foolish if we do not spend what we're given wisely.
Right.
We have to do that because I want to make sure that the kids that are going hungry, make sure that they get fed, but how do I do some of that stuff, and how do I safeguard it, and how do I do the most good with the least amount of harm? Because we had other guests on that will talk about the fact that we also don't want to make people dependent upon the state
Absolutely.
for things. We got to, it's such a multifaceted approach. And we don't have any, and that's why you got things like coalitions.
Yes. And it's helping people understand that most people who are on food stamps or getting supplemental nutrition, it's short term. It is helping them get over a rough patch in their lives. And then they go on to wonderful things. I myself have been food insecure. when I was a young adult in college, I gathered cans for food. I now have a master's degree.
Yeah. And again, this is my plug for education, that you may never be rich doing social service work.
That is true.
But you'll never be poor again because you now have a voice.
Yes.
You know how to engage, and because of that, you'll never be poor again. You'll never be in the underclass of society again because you were blessed to have that education.
Yes.
You know? Now again, doing social service work, you're never going to get rich either.
No.
And I got that, but we don't do these things because we're really out to get rich. We do them because we're trying to make a difference.
And my story is not unique. My guess is that if we had 20 people in a room and we asked people to stand up, if they themselves had been food insecure at one point in their life, or someone they knew or in their household, we'd get about 3 people, 4 people standing up. It's not unusual, but it doesn't mean it's a forever thing either.
Right, yeah. I stop and think about, hearing my dad tell stories. And you don't think about these when you're a kid. You're just like, oh my God, the grown-ups are telling stories again. But my grandpa died before Social Security ever existed.
Yes.
So my grandma, Dad just basically would later on in his life say, well, we'd have starved to death if it weren't for the fact that we were on the farm, and that we had an uncle who came to live with us and who helped us do the farming, because at the time they were too little to farm the whole thing themselves. And so I didn't realize why that uncle was so important to all of them. And, that's why they had such love and affection for him for all that time. But evidently my Uncle Edmund did that and, came and lived with them. So that was all, because he was their security.
Yes, he had the skills that
he
they
had
didn't.
the skills that they didn't have to do those things. And I just think about how many folks don't have that kind of, how many don't have an Uncle Edmund to move in and to help them keep from starving to death, that otherwise they'd had to ship the kids off to other places.
Yes. Well, and we've lost some of that social safety net in our community because we don't know our neighbors.
Right.
And that's another thing that we can do, grassroots, to help solve this, is that get to know your neighbors, and you might find out that someone in your neighborhood is food insecure. So how can you help them? Maybe they don't know how to grow a garden. Maybe they don't have enough money for seeds and good dirt, or know that we have a lending library where you can get tools to make a garden. Some things like that. It's sharing that knowledge, it's sharing the skills, and sometimes, yes, it's sharing food. It's time, treasure, and talent.
Yeah. And again, it's just like, we just don't, when you're lucky and blessed, you don't have a tendency to think about those, because it's just if we're not. How many in our own congregations fit that bill?
Sure.
And again, they don't want to talk about it because they feel ashamed or whatever, just because they don't happen to have those same blessings, and we just gloss right over it because we don't want, we don't see it. I mean, it's not that we don't want to see it, but it's just that we don't see it. And we don't even know what to do because there are people in our midst who are in that same situation and we don't even know it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you see them every day.
Yep. It's amazing. So whatever, we've got a few minutes yet. What else should we be doing to address hunger in our community?
Volunteer your time.
Okay.
And that can look a lot of different ways. You can volunteer at a local food pantry. You can volunteer at a church outreach. You can volunteer your time to maybe get your church to start a garden at the church where the produce is donated to the people in your congregation that need fresh fruits and vegetables. You can volunteer your time by getting to know your neighbor. All of those things can really, really help on a daily basis. I know by the time this airs, it's going to be in August, so it's going to be really too late to plant many things.
Right.
But
For this season.
for
Yeah.
this season, but it's a good time to kind of start the conversation, so everybody can enjoy in that bountiful harvest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I know when I used to live on the other side of the state, there was a group there that they just said, put in one more row of vegetables of something, put in one more row of vegetables for some of the folks in the city. And so in this rural farming communities, everybody, that with the big push was to put in one more row, to grow one more row, and then they had a Sunday where they would do that, and you know, they called it Operation Isidore, for St. Isidore, who's the patron saint of farmers. Same kind of thing. They would do their thing where they would do those kinds of things. Well, Ashley, it's been, as always, it's been good talking with you. It's always just interesting to see the, you know, the trying to back off from the whole thing and to look at the bigger level, where you and some of the members of the coalition continue to try to challenge us to say, let's get at some of these root causes. So again, talking about food security here in our hometown. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute, and we'll be back to wrap things up.
A new baby changes the world and each of us. The Sisters of Mercy devoted themselves to offering exceptional maternity and delivery care, training generations of nurses to do the same. Mercy continues to answer the same call, to not only care for your baby, but to cherish them too. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy. When they discovered there was no hospital, the Sisters of Mercy built one, as they had so many times before, offering healing and hope on the edge of the frontier. Mercy continues to answer the same call, to bring care wherever you or your child need it most. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy.
Well, again, thanks for being with us for another Sunday morning. I hope the rest of your day is as good as that I hope it started out for you. Not always pleasant topics, but today talking about food insecurity and knowing that many of our neighbors, 36,000 people here just in Jasper and Newton counties, when we consider all those families and all of their members, are in a little bit of a position to where they're doing okay right now, living paycheck to paycheck, everything's good. But many of those families are just one little downfall, one little wrong turn, one little unfortunate incident that will suddenly take them from being able to buy their groceries and do their things to suddenly having to make choices that perhaps they probably should not, probably in our society, have to make. And that is, okay, what am I going to have to sacrifice in order to just even feed my family? So we need to think about those causes, how we can fix them. Join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown. Let's take care of each other out in our community. God bless.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.